She sent her baby's photo by mistake. The millionaire froze when he saw it. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Isabella Thompson stared at her phone screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The photo she had just sent was meant for her mother. Instead, it had gone to Richard White, the man who had walked away from her 10 months ago, claiming love was a luxury he could not afford. Now he would see Noah's face. He would see the truth she had kept hidden. Across the city, Richard froze in his billion-dollar boardroom, his eyes locked on the image of a laughing baby whose features mirrored his own childhood photographs with stunning clarity. The deal that had consumed his thoughts for months suddenly meant nothing. The voices around the conference table faded to silence. Only one thought remained. This child could be his son. His fingers trembled as he typed his response, knowing that in seconds, everything would change forever. Some mistakes become the greatest gifts life offers. Some secrets, once revealed, cannot be buried again. Mr. White, the Shanghai investors are waiting for your decision. Richard White barely heard the words. His phone buzzed against the mahogany conference table, and when he saw Isabella's name illuminate the screen, time seemed to suspend itself. He had not heard from her in 10 months, not since that morning when he had told her their week together was over, that relationships were incompatible with his empire-building plans. "Give me a moment," he said, his voice tight with something he could not name. The photograph opened slowly, pixels forming into clarity. A baby, 8 months old, maybe 9. The child was laughing, his tiny fists raised in pure joy, sitting in what appeared to be a simple wooden crib. Richard's breath caught in his throat. He enlarged the image with shaking fingers, studying every detail of the child's face, the chin, the eyes, the way the baby's mouth curved when he smiled. Richard had seen that exact expression before, in his own baby pictures, the ones his mother had shown him countless times before her death. The resemblance was not merely strong, it was undeniable. "Sir, the investors, cancel the meeting." The words came out as a whisper, then louder. "Cancel everything. Clear my schedule for the rest of the day." Richard's assistant, Margaret, looked at him with concern. In 15 years of working for him, she had never seen him abandon a deal worth billions of dollars. His hands were visibly shaking as he typed his response to Isabella. "Where are you? I need to see you." "Now." He sent the message and waited, his entire world reduced to the 3 dots that appeared and disappeared on his screen, indicating she was typing, then stopping, then typing again. Meanwhile, across the city in her modest apartment, Isabella Thompson stared at her phone in horror. She'd been exhausted, running on 3 hours of sleep for the 4th night in a row. Noah had been teething, and her latest landscape architecture project had a deadline that was strangling her sanity. In her sleep-deprived state, she had selected the wrong contact when trying to send the photo to her mother. "No, no, no," she whispered, sinking onto her couch while Noah played with blocks on the floor beside her. Her phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Isabella." His voice sounded different, rawer, more vulnerable than she remembered. "That baby in the photo, how old is he?" She closed her eyes, her hand instinctively reaching for Noah, who looked up at her with those same dark eyes that had been haunting Richard White's conference room. 8 months. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken calculations. Richard's voice came again, quieter now. "Is he mine?" Isabella's tears came then, months of exhaustion and loneliness and fear finally breaking through the wall she had built around herself. "Yes." "Why did you not tell me?" Because you made it very clear that you did not want complications in your life. You said relationships were not part of your plan, remember? You said you had no room for anything that might interfere with your business goals. Richard leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words hitting him like physical blows. He remembered that morning with painful clarity, how he had convinced himself that walking away was the right choice, that Isabella deserved someone who could give her the kind of life she wanted, someone who was not consumed by the need to prove himself worthy of the empire his father had built. "Where are you living now?" he asked. "The same place. Nothing has changed for me, Richard. Everything has changed for me, but nothing has changed." He understood what she meant. Her world had been turned upside down by motherhood, but her circumstances remained the same. She was still living in her small apartment, still working endless hours to make ends meet, still facing everything alone. "I am coming over." "Richard, I do not think—" "Please, I need to see him. I need to see you both." Isabella looked down at Noah, who had managed to fit 3 blocks in his mouth simultaneously and was grinning at her around them. "Okay, but Richard, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you for anything. I never planned to ask you for anything. This was an accident." "I know," he said softly. "I am coming anyway." The drive from his downtown office to Isabella's apartment in the suburbs took 37 minutes in normal traffic. Richard made it in 22. He sat in his car outside her building for nearly 10 minutes, trying to prepare himself for what he was about to face. He had brought his phone, and on it was a photograph his mother had shown him hundreds of times, himself at 9 months old, sitting in his nursery, laughing at something just out of frame. When Isabella opened the door, Richard felt as though he had been punched in the stomach. She looked exhausted, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. But she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and the sight of her brought back every moment of their week together with startling intensity. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." Behind her, he could hear the sound of babbling, and his heart rate accelerated. "Is that him?" Isabella nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment was small but warm, filled with the chaos of new motherhood, toys scattered across the floor, a bouncy seat in the corner, tiny clothes hanging to dry on a rack by the window. And there, sitting on a blanket surrounded by blocks, was the most beautiful baby Richard had ever seen. Noah looked up when Richard entered the room, his dark eyes, Richard's eyes, studying this new person with intense curiosity. Richard stopped breathing. "He looks exactly like you did as a baby," Isabella said softly. "I have been looking at his face every day for 8 months, and I see you in every expression." Richard knelt down on the floor, maintaining a respectful distance from Noah, who continued to watch him with that serious, evaluating expression. "May I?" Richard asked, reaching into his pocket for his phone. Isabella nodded, and Richard showed her the photograph of himself as a baby. The resemblance was so striking that Isabella gasped, "My God, Richard, they could be the same child." Noah, apparently deciding that this stranger was interesting, began crawling toward Richard with determination. Richard froze, not knowing what to do as the baby approached and pulled himself up using Richard's knee for support. "He likes you," Isabella said, her voice thick with emotion. "He is usually shy with strangers." Richard looked down at his son, who was now attempting to climb up his leg with the single-minded focus that Richard recognized from his own approach to business deals. "Hi there, little guy," he said quietly. "I am your father. I know I am late, but I am here now." Noah responded by grabbing Richard's tie and trying to put it in his mouth. Richard laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. "And I guess I need to learn about baby-proofing." Isabella sat down on the couch, watching them with a mixture of joy and terror. This was not how she had imagined this moment. In all the times she had fantasized about Richard discovering Noah's existence, she had imagined anger, demands, lawyers. She had not imagined this, Richard on his knees on her living room floor, letting their son drool on his $1,000 suit, looking at Noah as though he were the most precious thing in the world. "He gets up at 5:30 every morning," she said, needing to break the silence. "He loves bananas but hates green beans. He's starting to pull himself up on furniture, so I had to move everything breakable to higher shelves. He has 8 teeth and is working on 2 more. He says mama and bye-bye and something that might be ball but could also be dog or car. It is hard to tell." Richard listened to every word, filing away each detail as though he were memorizing a crucial business proposal. "What time does he go to bed?" 7:30, usually. Sometimes earlier if he has had a particularly busy day of destroying the apartment. Noah had managed to get Richard's tie completely in his mouth and was now making happy gurgling sounds. Richard gently extracted the tie, and Noah immediately reached for his face, tiny fingers exploring Richard's jaw with fascination. "He is perfect," Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Isabella, he is absolutely perfect." The afternoon dissolved into something neither of them had expected. Richard, who had never held a baby in his life, found himself on the floor building block towers for Noah to knock down. Isabella made coffee and watched, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously as she witnessed Richard discover fatherhood in real time. When Noah began to fuss, Isabella prepared his afternoon bottle, and Richard watched in fascination as she transformed from the confident woman he remembered into someone entirely new, a mother who anticipated every need, who could interpret every cry, who moved with the easy competence of someone who had learned to function on no sleep and pure love. "Would you like to feed him?" she asked, offering Richard the bottle. Richard's hands were shaking again. "I do not know how. I will show you." Isabella guided Richard through the process, positioning Noah in his arms, showing him how to hold the bottle. Noah accepted this arrangement with the adaptability of a baby who had learned to be flexible, gazing up at Richard with those serious dark eyes. "He trusts you," Isabella observed. "That is unusual for him." "Maybe he knows," Richard said softly, unable to look away from Noah's face. Maybe somehow he knows." The sun was setting when Noah finally fell asleep in Richard's arms. Neither adult wanted to move, afraid of disturbing the moment, afraid of what came next. Richard had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. His hair was disheveled from Noah's grabbing. His expensive suit was covered in baby food and drool. He had never looked more handsome to Isabella. "I should put him in his crib," she whispered. "Not yet," Richard said. "Please. Just a few more minutes." Isabella curled up in the corner of the couch, watching them. "I'm sorry I did not tell you. When I found out I was pregnant, I was so angry and hurt. You had made it so clear that you did not want anything complicated in your life. I convinced myself that you would see the baby as a burden, an obligation. I thought I was protecting all of us." Richard looked at her then, his eyes filled with an emotion she could not name. "I was a coward. I convinced myself that I was protecting you by walking away, but I was really protecting myself. I was terrified of failing you the way I had failed at everything else that mattered. You never failed me, Richard. You gave me the most beautiful week of my life, and then you gave me Noah. Even if you never spoke to me again after today, you gave me Noah." "I am not going anywhere," Richard said quietly. "Not again. Not ever again." The next morning arrived with Noah's customary 5:30 wake-up call, and Isabella stumbled toward his crib with the muscle memory of exhaustion. But this morning was different. This morning she could hear Richard's voice from the kitchen, low and soothing, talking to someone on the phone. "Margaret, I need you to cancel everything for the next 2 weeks. Everything." I know the Jakarta deal is important, but this is more important. This is the most important thing that has ever happened to me." Isabella paused in the doorway, Noah in her arms, watching Richard pace her small kitchen while speaking into his phone. He had spent the night on her couch, insisting he wanted to be there for Noah's morning routine. "No, I cannot explain it over the phone. Just trust me. And Margaret, I need you to find me the best family lawyer in the city. Not for a custody battle," he added quickly, seeing Isabella's expression. "For establishing paternity and making sure Noah is protected, making sure both of them are protected." He ended the call and turned to see Isabella standing there, her hair still messed with sleep, Noah babbling happily in her arms. The sight of them together in the morning light made his chest tighten with an emotion he was only beginning to understand. "Good morning," he said softly. "You really stayed. I told you I was not going anywhere." Isabella moved past him to prepare Noah's breakfast, hyper-aware of Richard's presence in her small space. "You do not have to do this, you know. You do not have to turn your whole life upside down because of one mistake. Is that what you think this is? A mistake I'm trying to fix?" She paused, her hands stilling on Noah's high chair. "Oh, is it not?" Richard moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the scent of baby powder from the night before. "Isabella, look at me." She turned, and he cupped her face in his hands, the same way he had done that last morning 10 months ago, right before he had broken her heart. "I thought I was building something important with my life. I thought the deals and the money and the power were what mattered. But yesterday, when I held our son, I realized I'd been building the wrong thing entirely. I'd been constructing walls instead of a foundation." Noah chose that moment to let out a demanding shriek for his breakfast, and both adults laughed, despite the intensity of the moment. Isabella moved to feed him, and Richard watched, marveling at the easy rhythm she had developed with their son. "I want to learn," he said. "I want to learn everything. How to change diapers and make bottles and know what different cries mean. I want to learn how to be a father." "It is not as easy as closing business deals," Isabella warned, spooning pureed bananas into Noah's eager mouth. "You cannot negotiate with an 8-month-old. You cannot make him sleep through the night by offering him a better contract. Then I will learn a different way of getting what I want." Isabella felt a flutter of the old attraction, the same pull that had made her abandon her usual caution 10 months ago. "And what do you want, Richard?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching Noah grab fistfuls of banana and smear them in his hair. "I want my family. I want to wake up every morning and see both of you. I want to teach Noah how to ride a bike and help him with his homework and scare away the boys who want to date him when he is 16. I want to grow old with you, Isabella. I want to build something real." The spoon trembled in Isabella's hand. "You said relationships were not part of your plan." "I was wrong. I was so focused on proving myself worthy of my father's empire that I lost sight of what actually makes life worth living. Noah is not a complication in my life. He is the point of it. You are not a distraction from my goals. You are my goal." Noah, apparently bored with the adult conversation, threw his spoon on the floor with a triumphant giggle. Richard immediately bent to pick it up, and Isabella felt her heart crack open just a little bit more. "Your father," she said quietly. "He's going to hate this. He's going to hate me." Richard's expression darkened. "My father has controlled every aspect of my life for 37 years. He chose my schools, my career path, even tried to choose my wife. But he does not get to choose my son. He does not get to choose you. Richard, I have seen what men like your father can do when they want to protect their family's reputation. I do not have the resources to fight someone like that. You will not have to fight him alone. Isabella wanted to believe him, but she had been fighting alone for so long that the idea of having a partner felt almost impossible to accept. I need time to think about this. This is all happening so fast. I understand. But Isabella, while you are thinking, I want you to know something. Whether you decide to give us another chance or not, I am going to be in Noah's life. I am going to be the best father I can be. I am going to support both of you in every way possible. She looked at him, this man who had walked away from $1 billion deal to spend the afternoon playing with blocks on her living room floor. What if we try again and it does not work? What if we are too different? Or what if you realize that this life is not what you actually want? Then we will figure it out together. But Isabella, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I have loved you since that first morning when you brought me coffee and told me that my architectural plans were aggressively boring. I love you and I love our son, and I'm not going to let fear make my decisions anymore. Noah had finished his breakfast and was now attempting to climb out of his high chair with the determination of a mountaineer. Richard immediately moved to help, lifting Noah with an ease that surprised Isabella. Their son settled happily in Richard's arms, playing with his hair and babbling contentedly. "He likes you," Isabella said again, but this time her voice was softer, more wondering. "He is going to be stuck with me for the rest of his life. He might as well get used to me." Isabella's phone rang then, jarring them both back to reality. She glanced at the caller ID and sighed. "It is my biggest client. I have to take this." "Go ahead." "Noah and I will manage, will we not, buddy?" As Isabella spoke to her client about timeline changes and budget adjustments, Richard carried Noah around the apartment, pointing out different objects and naming them in a low, patient voice. "That is a window. And that is a plant. Your mother has always been good with plants. Oh, and that is a photograph of your mother receiving some kind of award. She is brilliant. Did you know that? She is the smartest person I have ever met." Noah listened to this commentary with serious attention, occasionally reaching out to grab whatever Richard was pointing at. When Isabella finished her phone call, she found them in her bedroom, Richard pointing at the framed photographs on her dresser. "And that is your grandmother, my mother. She would have loved you so much, Noah. She always wanted grandchildren, but I was too stubborn and scared to give her any. She would have spoiled you terribly." Isabella's throat tightened as she watched Richard introduce their son to the family he would never meet. "Tell me about her." "She was kind, gentle. She loved to garden. I think that is where you and she would have connected. She died when I was 28, and I have spent the last 9 years trying to prove to my father that I was worthy of carrying on the family name. But I think she would have been more proud of this, of me learning to be a father, than of all the business deals I have ever closed." Noah had fallen asleep again in Richard's arms, and Isabella marveled at how natural he looked holding their baby. "You are going to be a good father." "I hope so. I have a lot to learn." "We both do." "I've been making it up as I go along for 8 months. Richard looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw the same vulnerability she had glimpsed 10 months ago, before fear had made him run. "Will you teach me? Will you let me try to be the man you and Noah deserve?" Isabella reached out and touched his face, feeling the slight roughness of morning stubble under her fingertips. "I am terrified." "So am I. But I am also tired of being angry at you. I'm tired of missing you. I'm tired of raising our son alone when his father is right here, wanting to be part of his life." "Is that a yes?" "That is a maybe. A maybe that could become a yes if you prove to me that you mean what you say." Richard smiled then, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since he had walked back into her life. I can work with maybe. 3 days later, Richard White did something that sent shockwaves through the Manhattan financial district. He left work at 5 o'clock. Not only did he leave at 5, but he also stopped at a grocery store on his way to Isabella's apartment, consulting the list she had texted him with the concentration he usually reserved for merger documents. Diapers, size 3, baby food, bananas, and sweet potatoes. Formula, the blue container. Milk, bread, eggs, he muttered to himself, pushing a cart through the store with the awkward determination of a man who had never grocery shopped for a family in his life. The checkout clerk, a teenager with multiple piercings and an expression of permanent boredom, looked at his purchases with mild interest. First time. Is it that obvious? The panic in your eyes when you were trying to figure out which diapers were the right size was a pretty good clue. Also, you are wearing a suit that probably costs more than my car, so I am guessing you do not usually do the shopping. Richard looked down at his Armani suit and Italian leather shoes, realizing for the first time how out of place he must look. I am learning. Good for you, man. My dad never learned. Kid's lucky to have someone who cares enough to figure it out. As Richard drove to Isabella's apartment, he found himself thinking about the clerk's words. He had been so focused on building wealth and status that he had never stopped to consider what kind of legacy he actually wanted to leave. Now, with Noah in his life, the answer seemed obvious. He wanted to be remembered as a good father. Everything else was secondary. Isabella answered the door with Noah on her hip, both of them covered in what appeared to be pureed carrots. How did your first grocery shopping expedition go? I only had to call you twice to ask questions, so I consider it a success. That is progress. Yesterday you called me 4 times during your lunch meeting to ask if it was normal for Noah to make that clicking sound with his tongue. And you told me it was normal, which prevented me from rushing him to the emergency room, so those phone calls were necessary. Isabella laughed, and Richard felt that familiar tightening in his chest. He had forgotten how much he loved the sound of her laugh. Come in. Noah has been asking for you all day. He has been asking for me. Well, he has been pointing at the door and making demanding noises whenever someone knocks. I choose to interpret that as asking for you. Richard set the groceries on the kitchen counter and reached for Noah, who immediately lunged toward him with a happy squeal. Hi, buddy. Did you miss me? Over the past 3 days, Richard had developed a routine. He arrived at Isabella's apartment after work, usually around 6 o'clock, and stayed until after Noah's bedtime. He helped with dinner, learned to give Noah a bath without flooding the bathroom, and had mastered the art of reading "Goodnight Moon" in a voice that could put an overtired baby to sleep. Tonight, though, something was different. Isabella seemed distracted, checking her phone repeatedly and glancing toward the window with nervous energy. Everything okay? Richard asked, settling Noah in his bouncy seat while Isabella prepared dinner. My mother is coming tomorrow. Richard paused in the middle of making funny faces at Noah. Your mother? The one who was supposed to receive that photograph. That would be the one. And she does not know about me. She knows about you. She was the one who helped me through the pregnancy when I was angry and hurt and convinced that you were a heartless bastard who had used me and thrown me away. Richard resumed making faces at Noah, but with considerably less enthusiasm. So she hates me. She does not hate you. She just thinks you're a selfish, manipulative, emotionally unavailable workaholic who broke her daughter's heart and abandoned his child. That is not hatred. Richard, she is a mother. She is going to be suspicious of any man who wants to be involved with her daughter and grandson, but she is also fair. If you prove to her that you are serious about being a father, she will come around. Richard considered this, while Noah threw Cheerios at him with impressive accuracy. What do I need to do to prove I am serious? Be yourself, the real yourself, not the corporate version. She does not care about your money or your business success. She cares about whether you are going to stick around when things get difficult. And am I going to stick around when things get difficult? Isabella turned from the stove to look at him. I do not know. Are you? It was a fair question, and Richard knew his answer would determine everything. Isabella, 3 days ago I had never changed a diaper. I had never fed a baby or sung a lullaby or spent an hour on the floor building block towers, but I have done all of those things in the past 3 days, and I cannot imagine my life without them now. So yes, I am going to stick around when things get difficult. I am going to stick around when Noah is teething and neither of us has slept in days. I am going to stick around when he is 2 and throwing tantrums in grocery stores. I am going to stick around when he is 16 and thinks I am the most embarrassing person on the planet. What about when your father finds out? What about when the media starts asking questions about your secret family? What about when being with us becomes inconvenient for your business relationships? Richard stood up, leaving Noah happily destroying his Cheerios, and moved to where Isabella was standing at the stove. Then I will deal with it, all of it, together with you, if you will let me. Isabella's hands were shaking as she stirred the pasta sauce. I am scared, Richard. I am scared of letting myself believe that this could work. I'm scared of Noah getting attached to you and then losing you. I'm scared of falling in love with you again when I am just barely getting over falling in love with you the first time. Richard turned off the burner and gently took the spoon from her hands. Look at me. She turned, and he saw tears in her eyes. I am scared too. I'm terrified that I am going to fail at this, that I am going to disappoint you and Noah, that I am going to prove my father right when he says I am not capable of putting anything before business. But Isabella, I would rather fail at trying to be the man you deserve than succeed at being the man I was before. Your father really said that you are not capable of putting anything before business? He has said a lot of things over the years. Most of them designed to ensure that I stay focused on building the family empire rather than building a family of my own. Isabella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Why does he care so much about controlling your personal life? Because my personal life has never been personal. Every relationship I have ever had has been scrutinized for its potential impact on the business. Every woman I have dated has been evaluated for her suitability as a corporate wife. I think part of me walked away from you because I knew my father would disapprove, and I was not ready to fight that battle. And now I have a son who needs me to be brave. Now I have a woman I love who deserves better than a man who lets fear make his decisions. Noah chose that moment to let out a wail of frustration, having apparently gotten tired of throwing food and wanting some attention. Richard immediately went to him, lifting him from the bouncy seat and settling him on his lap. You are getting good at that, Isabella observed, watching Richard automatically adjust Noah's position to keep him comfortable. I'm getting good at a lot of things I never thought I would need to know how to do. They ate dinner together, Richard cutting his food one-handed while Noah sat on his lap, fascinated by the salt shaker and determined to put it in his mouth. Isabella watched them together, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. After dinner, they gave Noah his bath together, Richard holding him steady while Isabella washed his hair. Noah splashed enthusiastically, soaking both adults and most of the bathroom floor. He's going to be a swimmer, Richard said, wiping water from his face, or a professional mess maker. The jury is still out. When Noah was clean and dressed in his pajamas, Richard read him his bedtime story while Isabella cleaned up the kitchen. She could hear Richard's voice through the apartment, low and soothing, narrating the adventures of a runaway bunny. By the time she finished with the dishes, both Richard and Noah had fallen asleep in the rocking chair, Noah curled against Richard's chest with complete trust. Isabella stood in the doorway for a long moment, memorizing the sight of them together. This was what she had dreamed of during her pregnancy. Not the money or the luxury, but this. A father who would hold his son and read him stories and fall asleep in rocking chairs because he was too content to move. "Richard," she whispered, "you should put him in his crib." Richard's eyes opened slowly, and he smiled when he saw her. "I did not want to wake him. He will sleep better in his crib. Trust me." Richard stood carefully, carrying Noah to his crib and laying him down with the practiced gentleness he had developed over the past 3 days. Noah stirred slightly, but did not wake. His little fist curled against his cheek. "He is perfect," Richard said quietly, the same words he had spoken on that first day. "Most of the time. You have not experienced a full-scale Noah meltdown yet." "I look forward to it," Isabella laughed softly. "No, you do not." They stood together in the doorway of Noah's room, watching him sleep, and Isabella felt the last of her walls beginning to crumble. This man, who had once told her that relationships did not fit into his plans, was now standing in her son's nursery at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, looking at Noah as though he held the secrets of the universe. "And I should go," Richard said finally. "Let you both get some rest." "Richard," Isabella caught his hand as he moved toward the door. "My mother arrives at 10 tomorrow morning. If you want to meet her, if you want to be part of this conversation, you should be here." Richard squeezed her hand. "Are you sure?" "I am sure that I'm tired of being afraid. I'm sure that Noah deserves to have his father there when he meets his grandmother. I'm sure that I want to find out what happens when we stop running from this." Richard brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Then I will be here." Margaret Chen arrived at 10:15 the next morning, with the punctuality of a woman who had raised 3 children and buried 2 husbands. She was smaller than Richard had imagined, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Richard, standing in her daughter's living room in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit, and raised an eyebrow. "So, you are the famous Richard White?" "Yes, ma'am. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Chen." "We will see about that." Isabella appeared from the kitchen with Noah in her arms, and Margaret's entire demeanor softened. "There is my beautiful boy," she cooed, taking Noah from Isabella and immediately beginning the kind of nonsense conversation that grandmothers everywhere seem to instinctively know how to conduct. "Mom, this is Richard," Isabella said unnecessarily. "I figured that out. He looks exactly like the baby." Margaret studied Richard with the same intensity she was probably applying to a suspect photograph. "So Isabella tells me you have been coming around for a few days." "Yes, ma'am. Every day since I found out about Noah." "And before that? Where were you before that?" Richard felt Isabella tense beside him, but he had expected this question. "I was being a coward, ma'am. I was letting fear make my decisions instead of doing what was right." Margaret seemed surprised by his honesty. "At least you admit it." "Most men would have made excuses. I could make excuses, but they would not change the fact that I was not there when Isabella and Noah needed me." "And what makes you think you deserve a second chance?" Richard looked at Noah, who was happily pulling on his grandmother's necklace, then at Isabella, who was watching this interrogation with obvious anxiety. "I do not deserve a second chance, ma'am, but I am hoping you will give me one anyway, because I love your daughter and I love my son, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man they deserve." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, bouncing Noah gently while she studied Richard's face. "You have money?" "Yes, ma'am. Isabella does not care about money. If she did, she would have come after you for child support months ago." I know that. So do not think you can buy your way into this family. Do not think expensive gifts and fancy dinners are going to impress any of us. I understand. Good. Margaret handed Noah back to Isabella and turned to face Richard fully. Now, what are your intentions toward my daughter? Isabella made a small sound of embarrassment. Oh, Mom, this is not 1850. It is a perfectly reasonable question. This man disappeared from your life once already. I want to know if he plans to do it again. Richard met Margaret's gaze steadily. My intentions are to marry your daughter with her permission. My intentions are to adopt Noah legally and give him my name, if Isabella agrees. My intentions are to be the kind of husband and father that you raised Isabella to expect from a man. Both women stared at him. Isabella's mouth fell open slightly. You want to marry me? Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. I want to marry you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to teach Noah how to ride a bike and help him with his math homework and walk you down the aisle at his wedding someday. I want us to be a family in every sense of the word. Margaret looked between them, her expression softening. Well, that was more direct than I expected. Richard, we have known each other for 10 days total, Isabella said weakly. 1 week 10 months ago and 3 days this week. I knew I loved you on the second day 10 months ago. I have known I wanted to marry you since about an hour after I met Noah. The timeline does not matter, Isabella. What matters is that I am sure. You are sure. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Noah, apparently sensing the dramatic tension in the room, chose that moment to spit up all over Isabella's shirt. The spell was broken as Isabella laughed and reached for a burp cloth. Real life, she said to Richard. This is what you are signing up for. Spit up and sleepless nights and no time for romance or quiet conversations. I know what I am signing up for. Margaret had been watching this exchange with interest. Isabella, go change your shirt. Richard and I need to have a conversation. Isabella looked between them nervously. Mom, please do not. Go. Take Noah with you. We will be fine. When Isabella and Noah disappeared into the bedroom, Margaret turned to Richard with a look that would have been intimidating in a corporate boardroom. Sit down, young man. Richard sat on the couch, feeling like he was 16 years old and asking permission to take someone's daughter to prom. I know who you are, Margaret said without preamble. I know about your family's business, your reputation, your father's expectations. I also know that men like you do not usually marry women like my daughter, women like your daughter, working women, independent women, women who will not be content to be trophy wives who smile and stay silent while their husbands build empires. Richard considered this. You are right. Men like me usually marry women who will enhance our business prospects and never challenge our priorities. But I do not want to be like other men anymore. I want to be better than that. Why? Because your daughter deserves better than that. Because my son deserves better than that. Because I want to be someone they can be proud of, not someone they have to make excuses for. Margaret studied him for a long moment. What happens when your father finds out? What happens when your business associates disapprove? What happens when being married to Isabella becomes inconvenient for your career? Then I will deal with it. I will not sacrifice my family for my career. Not again. You say that now, but you have never had to choose before. You have never had to decide between a business opportunity and your family's well-being. Richard thought about the Jakarta deal he had walked away from, the Shanghai investors he had kept waiting, the dozen other opportunities he had already sacrificed in the past week. Actually, I have been making that choice every day since I found out about Noah. And every day I choose my family, Margaret's expression softened slightly. Isabella was devastated when you left. It took her months to stop crying herself to sleep. I will not watch her go through that again. Neither will I. She is stronger now, more independent. She has built a life for herself and Noah, and she does not need you to rescue her. I know. I am not here to rescue her. I'm here because I need her to rescue me. This seemed to surprise Margaret. Rescue you from what? From a life that looks successful on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. From becoming the kind of man who has everything and nothing at the same time. From wasting the only chance I have ever had at real happiness. Isabella emerged from the bedroom then, wearing a clean shirt and carrying Noah, who was now awake and ready for his morning entertainment. She looked between Richard and her mother anxiously. "Everything okay in here? We are fine," Margaret said, but her tone was warmer now. "Richard was just explaining to me why he thinks he deserves a second chance." "And what did you conclude?" Isabella asked. Margaret looked at Richard for a long moment, then at her daughter, then at Noah, who was reaching for Richard with obvious recognition and affection. "And I concluded that the baby likes him, which is more than I can say for the last man you brought home. I also concluded that he is either very good at lying or very much in love with you. Since Noah is an excellent judge of character, and he clearly trusts Richard, I'm inclined to believe it is the latter." Isabella sank onto the couch beside Richard, still holding Noah. "Mom, I am scared." "Of course you are scared. You would be crazy not to be scared. But sweetheart, you cannot let fear make your decisions for you. You taught me that when you decided to keep Noah and raise him by yourself instead of taking the easy way out. This is different." "How?" Isabella glanced at Richard, who was watching her with an expression of patient hope. "Because this time I am not just risking my own heart. I am risking Noah's future." Margaret leaned forward and took Isabella's free hand. "Honey, Noah's future is going to be shaped by watching how you live your life. Do you want him to see you taking chances on love? Or do you want him to see you letting fear keep you from being happy?" Noah, apparently bored with the adult conversation, began making demanding noises and reaching for Richard. Richard took him automatically, settling him on his lap with the natural ease that still amazed Isabella. "What do you think, buddy?" Richard asked Noah quietly. "Should I marry your mama?" Noah responded by grabbing Richard's nose and giggling, which seemed to be as clear an endorsement as anyone could ask for. Margaret laughed. "Well, that settles it. The baby has spoken." Isabella looked at her son, perfectly content in Richard's arms, then at Richard, who was looking at her as though she held his entire future in her hands. Maybe she did. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "How much time?" Richard asked. "I do not know. Days, weeks, maybe months. Take all the time you need. I will be here." Margaret stood up, gathering her purse and coat. "I should go. I have a bridge game at 2, and Martha Henderson gets cranky if anyone is late." "You are leaving already?" Isabella asked. "You two need to talk, and that baby needs his nap." Margaret kissed Noah's forehead, then Isabella's cheek. "You walk me to the door, Richard." Richard handed Noah back to Isabella and followed Margaret to the door. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. "My daughter is the best person I know," she said quietly. "She is kind and smart and stronger than she realizes. If you hurt her again, I will make your life very difficult." "I understand." "Good. I like you, Richard. Against my better judgment, I like you. Do not make me regret it." After Margaret left, Isabella and Richard sat in silence for a few minutes, Noah playing contentedly with his toys between them on the couch. "Your mother is formidable," Richard said finally. "She likes you. That was her being nice." "That was nice?" Isabella laughed. "Trust me, if she did not like you, you would know it." She once made a man cry just by asking him about his intentions. What happened to him? He married someone else within a month. I think she saved me from a lot of heartache. Richard reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Isabella's ear. And what about me? Am I going to save you from heartache or cause it? I do not know yet, but I think I'm willing to find out. 2 weeks later, Richard's life had developed a rhythm he had never imagined possible. He arrived at Isabella's apartment each morning at 7:30 with coffee and fresh pastries from the bakery down the street. He spent his lunch hours there, learning to feed Noah solid foods and marveling at the way their son could turn a simple meal into an abstract art project. His evenings were devoted to bath time, bedtime stories, and quiet conversations with Isabella after Noah fell asleep. The transformation had not gone unnoticed at White Investment Group. His assistant, Margaret, had taken to scheduling all his important meetings before 11 in the morning or after 7 at night, working around what she had begun calling his family time without a trace of irony. His business partners were baffled by his new priorities, but his productivity had actually increased. Apparently, knowing he had a specific window of time to complete his work made him more focused and efficient. This morning, however, something was different. Richard knocked on Isabella's door at his usual time, balancing coffee and a bag of blueberry muffins, but there was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time, and heard Noah crying inside the apartment. "Isabella?" he called through the door. "Is everything okay?" The door opened to reveal Isabella in her pajamas, her hair disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Noah was in her arms, his face flushed and streaked with tears. "Thank God you're here," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "He has been crying for 3 hours. I think he has an ear infection, but I cannot get him to calm down long enough to take his temperature." Richard immediately set down the coffee and muffins, reaching for Noah. "Hey, buddy, what is wrong?" Noah's crying intensified when Richard took him, and Richard felt a stab of panic. In the 2 weeks since he had become a father, he had grown accustomed to being able to soothe his son. This was the first time Noah had seemed inconsolable. "Have you called the pediatrician?" Richard asked, bouncing Noah gently while Isabella collapsed onto the couch. "I called at 6 this morning. They said to bring him in if his fever gets above 101 degrees, but I cannot get him to hold still long enough to take his temperature." Richard looked at Isabella more closely and realized she was shaking. "When did you last eat something?" "I do not remember. Yesterday sometime." "Isabella, you need to take care of yourself too. You cannot help Noah if you collapse from exhaustion." "I know that," she snapped, then immediately looked apologetic. "I'm sorry. I'm just so tired. And he has never been this upset before. I feel like I am failing at the one thing I'm supposed to know how to do." Richard sat down beside her, still holding Noah, who was now hiccuping between sobs. "You are not failing. You are an amazing mother. Sometimes babies get sick and there is nothing anyone can do except wait it out." "How do you know that?" "You have been a father for 2 weeks. I called my pediatrician friend from college last night when Noah seemed fussy, Dr. Sarah Martinez. She said ear infections are very common in babies Noah's age, and the crying can last for hours even with medication." Isabella stared at him. "You called a pediatrician about Noah?" "I wanted to be prepared in case something like this happened. I also bought a thermometer, infant Tylenol, and a humidifier." "They are in my car." For the first time since Richard had arrived, Isabella smiled slightly. "You bought medical supplies?" "I bought everything Dr. Martinez recommended for a basic baby medicine cabinet. I figured we should be prepared." "We?" "Isabella, I know you have been doing this alone for 8 months, and you have done an incredible job. But you do not have to do it alone anymore. Let me help." Isabella leaned against him, her exhaustion finally overcoming her need to maintain control. I am so scared when he cries like this. What if something is really wrong? What if I miss something important? Then we will handle it together. But Isabella, Noah is going to be fine. Babies cry. It does not mean you are doing anything wrong. Richard's phone rang then, and he glanced at the caller ID before answering. Margaret, I'm not going to be in the office this morning. Can you reschedule my 10 o'clock meeting? Of course, Mr. White. Is everything all right? Noah is sick. We might need to take him to the doctor. There was a pause, and then Margaret's voice came back warmer than usual. I hope the little one feels better soon. I will clear your schedule for the rest of the day. When Richard hung up, Isabella was looking at him with something like wonder. You just cancelled your meetings because Noah is sick. Of course I did. He is my son. Richard, 6 months ago, you probably would not have cancelled a meeting if you were sick. 6 months ago, I had different priorities. Noah's crying had subsided to exhausted whimpering, and Richard was able to take his temperature with the thermometer he retrieved from his car, 102 degrees. We should take him to the doctor, Richard said quietly. The pediatrician's office was a revelation to Richard, who had never spent time in a medical facility designed for children. The walls were painted with cartoon animals, toys were scattered throughout the waiting room, and the sound of crying babies was constant background noise. Isabella sat beside him, holding Noah, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep. I hate this, she said quietly. And I hate seeing him sick and not being able to fix it. The doctor will give him something to help with the pain. He will be better in a few days. How do you know that? Because Dr. Martinez explained it to me. Ear infections are painful but not dangerous in otherwise healthy babies. The antibiotics will clear up the infection and the pain medication will help him sleep. Isabella looked at him curiously. And you really did research this, did you not? I researched everything. Ear infections, teething, developmental milestones, sleep regression, feeding schedules. I have been reading parenting books every night after I leave your apartment. Why? Because I want to be useful. I want to be the kind of father who knows what to do when his child is sick or scared or hurt. I do not want to be helpless. Richard, no parent knows what to do all the time. We all just figure it out as we go along. Maybe, but I want to figure it out faster. I have 8 months of fatherhood to catch up on. The doctor confirmed Richard's diagnosis, a mild ear infection that would respond well to antibiotics. Noah screamed through the examination, but calmed down as soon as Isabella picked him up again. By the time they returned to the apartment, he was alert and even managing occasional smiles. See, Richard said, settling Noah in his bouncy seat while Isabella filled his prescription. I told you he would be fine. You were right. Thank you for staying with us today. Where else would I be? Isabella paused in the doorway, looking back at him. With your billion-dollar deals and your important meetings and your life that does not revolve around a sick baby. Isabella, this is my life now. This is the life I choose. Even when it is messy and unpredictable and completely different from what you are used to. Especially then. That afternoon, while Noah napped and Isabella caught up on work emails, Richard's phone rang. The caller ID made his stomach tighten. James White, his father. I need to take this, he told Isabella, stepping onto her small balcony and closing the door behind him. Hello, Dad? Richard, we need to talk. About what? About the rumors that have been circulating about you, about your sudden lack of interest in the Jakarta expansion, about your new habit of leaving the office in the middle of important negotiations. Richard closed his eyes. He had known this conversation was coming, but he had hoped to have more time to prepare. What rumors? The kind that suggest you have been distracted by personal matters. The kind that make our investors nervous about your commitment to the company. My commitment to the company has never been stronger, Dad. I am just managing my time more efficiently. Efficiently? You walked out of a meeting with the Singapore Development Group last week. Margaret told them you had a family emergency. Richard could see Isabella through the glass door, sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop. Noah sleeping peacefully in his crib, visible through the bedroom doorway. It was not an emergency, exactly, but it was important. More important than a deal worth $800 million. Yes. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When James White spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. I think you need to come to dinner this Sunday. We need to discuss your priorities. Dad, this is not a request, Richard. Sunday at 7, do not bring anyone with you. The line went dead, and Richard stood on the balcony for a long moment, staring at his phone. Through the glass, he could see Isabella watching him with concern. He forced a smile and went back inside. Everything okay? She asked. Fine, just business. But Isabella was not fooled. That was your father, was not it? Richard nodded reluctantly. He wants to have dinner on Sunday to discuss my recent behavior. Your recent behavior? My sudden interest in having a personal life. My tendency to prioritize family time over business meetings. Isabella's expression grew guarded. What are you going to tell him? The truth. That I have a son, and that my priorities have changed. Richard, maybe you should think about this. Maybe you should ease him into the idea gradually. Why? Are you ashamed of Noah, of us? Of course not. But your father is a powerful man, and powerful men do not like surprises. They especially do not like surprises that might affect their business interests. Richard moved to where Isabella was sitting and knelt down beside her chair. Isabella, my father is going to have to accept that my life is different now. I'm not going to hide you and Noah like some kind of dirty secret. I'm not asking you to hide us. I'm asking you to be smart about how you handle this. Your father could make our lives very difficult if he wanted to. He would not do that. Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain that he would not use his money and influence to try to break us up if he thought we were bad for his business? Richard wanted to say yes, he was certain, but the truth was more complicated. His father had interfered in his personal life before, had made it clear that he expected Richard to marry someone who would enhance the family's social standing rather than complicate it. A working single mother was not what James White had in mind for his son's wife. I will handle my father, Richard said finally. You do not need to worry about him. Richard, I have been taking care of myself and Noah for a long time. I know how to worry about people who could hurt us. That evening, after Noah was asleep, Richard and Isabella sat on her couch, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about their days. It was a routine they had developed over the past 2 weeks, these quiet hours after bedtime when they could reconnect as adults rather than co-parents. Tell me about your father, Isabella said quietly. What is he really like? Richard was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in his glass. He is brilliant, ruthless when he needs to be, but brilliant. He built White Investment Group from nothing, turned it into one of the most successful firms in the country. He has very definite ideas about what success looks like, and those ideas do not include surprise grandchildren. Those ideas include marrying someone who can help advance the family's business interests, someone from the right social circles, with the right connections, who understands that being a White means putting the company first. And I am none of those things. You are better than all of those things. You are real and you are honest, and you love our son more than anything in the world. You are exactly what I want in a wife." Isabella curled up against his side, her head on his shoulder. "But I am not what your father wants. My father does not get to choose my wife. Richard, what if he gives you an ultimatum? What if he threatens to cut you off, or remove you from the company, or disinherit you? Then I will start my own company." "With what money?" "If he cuts you off, Isabella, I have been saving and investing my own money for 15 years. I am not completely dependent on my father, even though he likes to think I am. But the company is your whole life. It is everything you have worked for." Richard turned to face her fully. "No, this is everything I have worked for. You and Noah. This life we are building together. The company is just a way to make money. You are my family." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "I am so scared of losing this. I am so scared of your father finding a way to take you away from us. That is not going to happen. How can you be so sure?" "Because I am not going to let it happen. Because I have finally found something worth fighting for." But even as Richard said the words, he felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. His father was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully, and Richard had never directly defied him before. Sunday dinner was going to change everything, one way or another. Sunday arrived grey and drizzly, matching Richard's mood as he drove through the gates of his childhood home in the wealthy suburb of Greenwich. The white estate sprawled across 20 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, all of it designed to impress visitors with the family's wealth and status. Richard had grown up here, but it had never felt like home the way Isabella's small apartment did. His father was waiting in the library, a room lined with first-edition books that James White had never read but had purchased because they looked impressive. He was a tall man in his early 70s, still handsome despite his age, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that had made him successful in business. "Richard, you look tired." "Hello, Dad." "Thank you for the observation. Sit down. We need to talk." Richard remained standing. "What do you want to talk about?" "Your recent behavior, your lack of focus at work. The way you have been prioritizing personal matters over business obligations. I have not missed any important deadlines or lost any major clients. My work performance has been excellent." "Your work performance has been adequate, but adequate is not enough for a white. We do not succeed by being adequate." Richard felt the familiar mixture of anger and guilt that his father always inspired. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "I am not accusing you of anything. I am stating facts. You have been distracted. You have been unavailable for critical meetings. You have been acting like a man who has lost sight of his priorities. Maybe I have found better priorities." James White's expression hardened. "Such as?" This was the moment Richard had been dreading and anticipating for days. "I have a son, Dad, an 8-month-old son named Noah." The silence in the library was absolute. James White's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally something that might have been disappointment. "I see." "And the mother?" "Her name is Isabella Thompson. She is a landscape architect. She is brilliant and beautiful, and the best mother Noah could possibly have." "How long have you known about this child?" 3 weeks. "And you have known the mother for how long?" Richard hesitated. "We met last year. We were together for a week. She found out she was pregnant after we stopped seeing each other. After you stopped seeing each other, or after you ended the relationship?" "After I ended it." James White walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the perfectly maintained gardens. "Let me understand this situation. You had a brief affair with a working woman, abandoned her when she became inconvenient, and now you have discovered that she bore your child without informing you. It was not like that. How was it exactly? Richard felt his temper rising. I fell in love with her. I was scared of what that meant, so I convinced myself I was protecting her by ending things. She found out she was pregnant after I left, and she decided to raise Noah alone rather than come to me for help. Why? Because she thought I would see the baby as a burden. And was she wrong? The question hit Richard like a physical blow. Of course she was wrong. Noah is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Better than your career, better than the company you will inherit, better than the life you have spent 37 years building. Yes, James White turned from the window to face his son. You are being naive, Richard. You are allowing sentiment to cloud your judgment. I'm allowing love to guide my decisions for the first time in my life. Love. James White said the word as though it tasted bitter. Love does not build empires, Richard. Love does not create generational wealth. Love is a luxury that men like us cannot afford. Men like us. Men with responsibilities, men with legacies to protect, men who understand that personal desires must be subordinated to larger goals. Richard stared at his father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Is that what you did? Is that why Mom was so unhappy? Your mother understood her role. She understood that being a White meant making sacrifices for the greater good of the family. She was miserable, Dad. She died young because she spent her entire life suppressing who she really was in order to be the wife you needed for business purposes. Your mother died of cancer, not unhappiness. She died of cancer, that she might have fought harder if she had had more reasons to live. James White's expression grew dangerous. You are out of line. Am I? Or am I finally seeing things clearly? What you are seeing is a fantasy. This woman, this child, they are not your real life, Richard. They are a distraction from your real life. They are my real life. Everything else is just work. Work that has provided you with everything you have ever had. Work that has given you the education, the connections, the opportunities that allowed you to meet this woman in the first place. Richard felt the weight of his father's logic. The same arguments that had controlled his life for so long. I am grateful for everything you have given me, Dad, but I am not going to sacrifice my family for the company. You are going to have to choose. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Richard had known this moment was coming, but hearing it stated so bluntly still felt like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? I mean that if you continue this relationship, if you insist on prioritizing this woman and child over your responsibilities to the company, then you will need to find another career path. You are threatening to fire me. I am offering you a choice. You can be my son and heir, or you can be a family man with a working-class wife and a child who was born out of wedlock. But you cannot be both. Richard felt something crack inside his chest, a breaking that was both painful and liberating. Then I choose my family. James White had clearly expected a different response. You are not thinking clearly? Take some time to consider what you are giving up. I am not giving up anything that matters. I'm gaining everything that matters. You are making a mistake that will destroy your life. No, Dad. I am correcting the mistake I made when I walked away from Isabella the first time. Richard moved toward the door, but his father's voice stopped him. If you leave here tonight, if you choose them over the company, then you are no longer my son. You will receive nothing from me, nothing from the company, nothing from the family trust. You will be on your own. Richard turned back to face his father. I have been on my own my entire life, Dad. I just did not realize it until now. He left the house where he had grown up and drove through the rain toward Isabella's apartment. toward the life he was choosing over everything else he had ever known. His phone rang constantly. His father, his assistant, business associates who had somehow already heard about the confrontation. He ignored them all. When he knocked on Isabella's door, she took one look at his face and pulled him inside without a word. Noah was on the floor, playing with blocks, and he looked up when Richard entered, giving him the kind of smile that made everything else seem unimportant. "How did it go?" Isabella asked quietly. "About as well as you would expect." "Richard, what happened?" He told her everything, the ultimatum, his choice, the threat to disown him. Isabella listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail. "Oh God," she said when he finished. "Richard, what have you done? I chose you. I chose us. You chose us over your entire inheritance, over the company you have spent your life building. I chose love over money. I chose family over business. I chose happiness over status." Isabella was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Richard, you do not understand what you have given up. You do not understand what this means. I understand exactly what this means. It means I am free to build the life I want instead of the life my father planned for me. It means you have no job, no income, no security. It means you gave up everything for a woman and a baby you have known for 3 weeks. Richard knelt down beside her on the couch, taking her hands in his. "Isabella, look at me. I gave up a job working for a man who thinks love is a weakness. I gave up money that came with the condition that I live my life according to someone else's rules. I gave up security that was really just a comfortable prison. But what are we going to do? How are we going to live? We are going to figure it out together. I have savings, investments, connections. I can start my own company, find other work, build something new. But whatever we do, we will do it as a family." Noah crawled over to them then, pulling himself up using Richard's leg and babbling happily. Richard lifted him up, holding him close, breathing in the sweet baby smell of his son. "Look at him, Isabella. Look at our son. He does not care about my father's money or the family company, or any of the things I thought were so important. He just wants us to love him and take care of him and be there when he needs us." Isabella wiped her eyes, looking at Richard holding Noah. "You really think we can make this work? Just the 3 of us, without any safety net?" "I know we can, because what we have is real, and everything else was just an illusion of security. I am terrified. So am I. But I would rather be terrified with you than safe without you." That night, after Noah was asleep, Richard and Isabella lay in bed together for the first time since their reunion, holding each other in the darkness and talking about their future. It was a future that suddenly seemed both more uncertain and more possible than either of them had imagined. "What are you going to do about work?" Isabella asked quietly. "I am going to start my own investment firm. I have clients who will come with me, deals I have been working on that are not tied to my father's company. It will be smaller at first, but it will be mine. And if it does not work, then I will find something else. I will do whatever it takes to provide for my family." Isabella was quiet for a long moment. "Richard, I need you to understand something. I do not need you to provide for us. I have been supporting Noah and myself for 8 months. I can continue to do that. I know you can, but I do not want you to have to do it alone anymore. What if your father changes his mind? What if he decides he wants a relationship with Noah and offers to take you back?" Richard turned to face her in the darkness. "Then I will tell him that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. I will tell him that I already have everything I need." "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure you will not regret this?" Isabella, 3 weeks ago I thought success meant having enough money to buy anything I wanted. Now I know success means having something worth more than money. I will never regret choosing you and Noah." But even as he said the words, Richard could not shake the feeling that his father would not accept this defeat quietly. James White was not a man who let go of things easily, and losing his son and heir would be seen as a business failure that required correction. The real battle, Richard suspected, was just beginning. The first week of Richard's new life began with a series of phone calls that ranged from supportive to devastating. His assistant Margaret called to tell him that several of his longtime clients had already expressed interest in following him to whatever firm he decided to start. His college roommate David called to offer office space in his downtown building. His business school mentor called to provide contacts and advice. But there were other calls too. Clients who regretfully explained that they could not afford to anger James White by continuing to work with his estranged son. Business associates who suddenly became unavailable when Richard tried to reach them. Doors that had always been open to him were now firmly closed. "It is worse than I thought it would be," he admitted to Isabella on Thursday evening as they cleaned up after dinner. "My father has more influence than I realized." Isabella paused in loading the dishwasher. "How much worse?" "About half the clients I thought would come with me have decided to stay with White Investment Group. Some of the deals I was counting on have fallen through. My father has made it clear that anyone who works with me will not be welcome to work with him. Richard, maybe you should reconsider. Maybe you should call him and try to work something out." "No." Richard's voice was firm. "I am not going back to him. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had been brave enough to choose my own path." But privately, Richard was beginning to understand the full scope of what he had given up. His father's network extended throughout the financial industry, and being cut off from it meant starting over in ways he had not anticipated. The savings he had thought would provide security were going to disappear much faster than he had calculated if he could not start generating income soon. Noah, oblivious to the adult concerns swirling around him, had entered a phase of determined mobility. He was pulling himself up on everything, taking tentative steps while holding onto furniture, and getting into mischief with the single-minded focus of a tiny explorer. Richard found these developments endlessly fascinating, even as they added to the household chaos. "He is going to walk soon," Isabella observed, watching Noah cruise along the couch with determination. "How can you tell?" "He has that look in his eyes, like he has figured out the secret to something important, and he is just waiting for the right moment to show us." Richard was on the floor, building a tower of blocks for Noah to knock down, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he did not recognize. "Richard White. This is Patricia Morrison from the legal firm Morrison, Blake and Associates. I represent your father." Richard's blood went cold. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Morrison?" "My client would like to arrange a meeting to discuss the custody arrangements for his grandson." "I am sorry, what?" "Mr. White is prepared to seek legal custody of the minor child Noah Thompson, born to Isabella Thompson on October 15th of last year. He believes the child would be better served living in a stable environment with adequate financial resources." Richard looked at Isabella, who had gone pale, and at Noah, who was happily demolishing the block tower with no idea that his world was about to be threatened. "The child is not available for custody arrangements. He lives with his parents. According to our research, the child lives with his unmarried mother in a modest apartment, while his father has recently become unemployed due to personal choices that demonstrate questionable judgment. My employment status is not your concern. It is when it affects the welfare of a minor child who deserves the advantages that come with being a member of the White family." Richard felt rage building in his chest, a fury unlike anything he had ever experienced. "Let me be very clear, Mrs. Morrison. My son is not available for custody arrangements with anyone. He lives with his parents, and that is where he is going to stay. Mr. White is prepared to be very generous in his custody offer. The child would want for nothing. He would have the best education, the finest health care, every advantage money can provide. He already has everything he needs." "Does he? Does he have a college fund? Does he have health insurance that will cover any medical emergency? Does he have the security of knowing his future is protected?" Richard ended the call without another word, his hands shaking with anger. Isabella was staring at him with terror in her eyes. "What did they say?" she whispered. "My father wants custody of Noah." Isabella sank onto the couch, her face white. "He can do that. He can just take him away from us." "He can try, but he will not succeed. Richard, your father has unlimited money and unlimited connections. He can hire the best lawyers in the country. What do we have to fight him with? We have the truth. We have the fact that Noah belongs with his parents who love him. That might not be enough." Richard looked at his son, who had moved on from block destruction and was now attempting to eat the remote control. The idea of Noah being taken away from them, raised by his cold and manipulative grandfather, filled Richard with a fear so intense it was physically painful. "We need a lawyer," he said quietly. "As we cannot afford the kind of lawyer who can fight your father, then we will find another way." That night, after Noah was asleep, Richard and Isabella sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents they had printed from the internet, trying to understand their rights and options. The more they read, the more hopeless their situation seemed. "Look at this," Isabella said, pointing to a paragraph about custody determinations. "As the court considers the financial stability of each potential guardian, your father can provide things for Noah that we cannot even dream of. Money is not everything. It is when it comes to legal battles. Richard, your father can drag this out for years. He can make our lives miserable while he fights for custody. Even if he does not win, he can bankrupt us trying to defend ourselves." Richard reached across the table and took her hand. "Isabella, I am not going to let him take Noah away from us. How are you going to stop him?" "I do not know yet, but I will figure it out." Isabella squeezed his hand. "Maybe we should consider his offer. Maybe we should think about what might actually be best for Noah. You think Noah would be better off being raised by my father?" "I think Noah would be better off having access to the best schools and the best health care and never having to worry about money. I think he would be better off not being caught in the middle of a custody battle between his parents and his grandfather." Richard stared at her. "You want to give him up?" "I want what is best for him, even if it breaks my heart." "Isabella, what is best for him is being with parents who love him. What is best for him is growing up in a home where he is valued for who he is, not what he represents to the family legacy." "But what if we cannot give him the opportunities he deserves? What if we cannot afford to send him to college or pay for medical treatments if he gets sick? What if love is not enough?" Richard felt something break inside him at her words. "Do you really believe that? Do you really think my father's money is worth more than our love? I do not know what I believe anymore. I am so scared, Richard. I am so scared of losing him that I cannot think straight." Richard got up from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street below. Everything he had thought he was building, everything he had sacrificed for, seemed to be crumbling around him. His father had found the one weapon that could destroy him, the threat to take away his son. "We are not giving up," he said finally, turning back to Isabella. "We are not letting him win. What choice do we have? We fight. We find a way to fight back. With what? We have no money, no connections, no power. He has everything. Richard looked at her, sitting at the table surrounded by legal documents, her face streaked with tears, and felt a resolution settle in his chest like steel. He does not have everything. He does not have what we have. What do we have? We have the truth. We have love. We have each other. That might not be enough. Then we will make it enough. But even as Richard said the words, he could feel doubt gnawing at him. His father was right about one thing. Money and power usually won these battles. Love might be enough to sustain a family, but it might not be enough to protect one. Friday morning brought news that made their situation even more desperate. Isabella's largest client, the one responsible for nearly 40% of her income, called to cancel their contract. "I am sorry, Isabella," said Margaret Harrison, the woman who had hired Isabella to design the gardens for her company's new headquarters. "The project has been indefinitely postponed." "Postponed? But we are scheduled to begin installation next week." "I know, and I apologize for the short notice. There have been some changes in our financing, and we need to reassess our budget priorities." Isabella knew immediately what had happened. "This is about Richard, is not it?" There was a long pause. "I cannot discuss the specific reasons for our decision." "Margaret, you know my work. You know the quality I deliver. This has nothing to do with my professional capabilities." "Isabella, you are a talented designer, and I hope we can work together again in the future when circumstances are different." When Isabella hung up the phone, she sat staring at it for a long moment before calling Richard. "They cancelled the Westfield project," she said without preamble when he answered. "What?" "Margaret Harrison just called. They are postponing the project indefinitely due to financing issues. But Richard, there are no financing issues. Her company just secured a major investment deal last month. This is your father's doing." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry, Isabella. I am so sorry. He is not just coming after you. He is coming after me too. He's trying to destroy my business. I will find a way to stop this." "How?" "Richard, if he can convince my clients to cancel their contracts, what else can he do? What if he goes after the apartment lease? What if he finds a way to have Noah removed from my care while we are fighting the custody battle?" Richard felt the walls closing in around them. His father was not just threatening to take Noah away, he was systematically destroying their ability to fight back. Without income, without resources, they would be completely vulnerable. "I am coming over," he said to Richard. "Maybe you should think about calling your father. Maybe you should see if there is some way to work this out. I am not negotiating with a man who is threatening to steal my son." But when Richard arrived at Isabella's apartment, he found her packing Noah's clothes into a suitcase. "What are you doing?" "I am taking Noah to my mother's house." "What? Why?" Isabella did not look up from the suitcase. "Because your father has made it clear that he can reach us anywhere. Because I need to get Noah somewhere safe while we figure out what to do." "Isabella, running away is not going to solve this." "I am not running away. I am protecting our son." Richard watched her fold tiny shirts and pants with shaking hands, and he realized she was more than scared. She was terrified. "Talk to me. Tell me what you are thinking." "I'm thinking that your father is more powerful than we imagined. I'm thinking that he can destroy our lives without even trying very hard. I'm thinking that maybe the only way to protect Noah is to disappear for a while." "You want to disappear. Just leave. I want to take Noah somewhere your father cannot find him while we figure out our next move." Richard sat down heavily on the couch. "And Isabella, if you run, it will look like you are hiding something. It will make the custody case worse." "What custody case?" "Richard, we cannot afford to fight your father in court. We cannot afford lawyers. We cannot afford to miss work while we sit in courtrooms. And we certainly cannot afford to lose." "So what are you suggesting?" Isabella finally looked at him, her eyes red with tears. "I am suggesting that maybe your father is right. Maybe Noah would be better off with him." "You do not mean that." "I do not know what I mean anymore. I know I love Noah more than anything in the world. I know I want what is best for him, and I know that fighting a custody battle we cannot win is not what is best for him." Richard felt panic rising in his chest. "Isabella, please do not do this. Please do not give up on us." "I am not giving up on us. I am trying to protect Noah by giving him to my father. By letting that cold, manipulative man raise our son. By making sure Noah has opportunities we cannot give him." Richard stood up and began pacing the small living room. "This is exactly what my father wants. He wants us to be so scared and overwhelmed that we just hand Noah over to him. Maybe he is right to want that. Isabella, look at me." Richard stopped pacing and knelt down in front of her. Do you remember 3 weeks ago when you sent me that photo by mistake? Do you remember how Noah looked at me when I first held him? Do you remember how he laughed when I read him his bedtime story last night?" "Of course I remember. Noah belongs with us, not because we can give him the most expensive things, but because we love him. Because we are his parents." "Love might not be enough, Richard. Love is all we have." Isabella leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. "I am so scared of making the wrong choice. I am so scared of being selfish and keeping him with us when he might be better off somewhere else. The wrong choice would be giving up without a fight. The wrong choice would be letting my father win. Then what do we do? How do we fight someone who has unlimited resources and no conscience?" Richard was quiet for a long moment, thinking, "We make this public." "What do you mean?" "I mean we tell our story. We go to the media. We explain what is happening. We let the public see what kind of man my father really is." "Richard, that could backfire. What if it makes you look like a bitter son trying to damage his father's reputation? What if it makes him look like a bitter old man trying to steal his grandson from loving parents?" Isabella considered this. "It is risky." "Everything is risky now, but at least this way we are fighting back instead of just waiting for him to destroy us." "What about your business?" "If you go public with this, it will be even harder to rebuild your career." "My career does not matter if I lose my family." Isabella looked at him for a long moment, then at Noah, who was napping peacefully in his crib, unaware of the battle being fought over his future. "Okay," she said finally, "we fight. We fight. But Richard, if we do this, there is no going back. If we declare war on your father, he will use every weapon he has against us. Then we better make sure we win." That afternoon, Richard made a phone call to Sandra Martinez, a reporter for the New York Times who had interviewed him several times over the years about business trends and investment strategies. She was smart, thorough, and most importantly, she was not someone who could be bought or intimidated by James White. "Sandra, this is Richard White. I have a story for you that I think you will find very interesting." The article appeared in the Sunday edition of the New York Times under the headline, "When Love Becomes a Liability, a Father's Fight for His Son." Sandra Martinez had done her job with devastating precision, painting a portrait of James White as a man so consumed with control that he was willing to destroy his own son's happiness to maintain his grip on the family legacy. Richard sat in Isabella's living room at 6 in the morning, reading the article aloud while she fed Noah his breakfast. The story laid out everything: Richard's decision to prioritize his family over business, his father's ultimatum, the systematic destruction of their income sources, and the custody threat that hung over them like a sword. "She got it all," Isabella said quietly. "Every detail. The question is whether anyone will care." They did not have to wait long for an answer. Richard's phone started ringing at 7:30, and it did not stop. Reporters wanting follow-up interviews, former colleagues expressing support or outrage, strangers calling to share their own stories of family versus business conflicts. But the most important call came at 9:15. Margaret, Richard's former assistant, called with her voice tight with excitement. "Mr. White, you need to see the website. The article is trending on every social media platform. People are sharing their own stories about choosing family over money. The hashtag love over legacy is everywhere." What kind of response is it getting? Overwhelmingly positive. People are calling your father a bully and a dinosaur. The younger generation especially is rallying behind your story. Oh, and Mr. White, 3 of your father's biggest clients have called this morning to express concerns about the company's values. Richard felt the first stirring of hope he had experienced in days. Really? Really? I think you might have just given people permission to say what they have been thinking about men like your father for years. When Richard hung up the phone, Isabella was watching him with cautious optimism. Good news? Maybe. The story is resonating with people. It sounds like my father might be facing some public relations problems of his own. But their celebration was short-lived. At 11 o'clock, Patricia Morrison called back. Mr. White, my client is very displeased with your decision to make this matter public. He asked me to inform you that he is prepared to accelerate the custody proceedings. What does that mean? It means we will be filing for emergency custody tomorrow morning, citing concerns about the child's welfare, given the unstable environment created by your recent actions. Richard felt his blood turn to ice. On day what unstable environment? A father who has chosen unemployment over responsibility, a mother whose business is failing, and parents who are more concerned with media attention than with providing security for their child. That is not. The hearing is scheduled for Wednesday at 9 a.m. I suggest you find legal representation. The line went dead, and Richard stared at his phone in disbelief. His father was not backing down, he was escalating. The public pressure had only made him more determined to win. What is it? Isabella asked, seeing his expression. Emergency custody hearing. Wednesday morning. Isabella's face went white. Emergency? What emergency? Us. We are the emergency, apparently. Our decision to fight back is being used as evidence that we are unfit parents. Noah, sensing the tension in the room, began to fuss. Isabella picked him up automatically, holding him close, while her mind raced through possibilities and consequences. Richard, we need a lawyer, a good one, today. We cannot afford a good one. Then we need to find someone who will work for free, someone who believes in our cause. Richard was already scrolling through his contacts. I might know someone. David Chen had been Richard's roommate at Harvard Law School before deciding that corporate law was too soul-crushing and switching to family advocacy. He now ran a small practice that specialized in helping families navigate custody disputes, often taking cases pro bono when he believed in the cause. Richard, I just read the Times article. Hell of a thing to wake up to on a Sunday morning. David, I need help. My father is trying to take my son away from us. I know. I also know that you probably cannot afford my usual rates, which is fine because I am waiving them. Richard felt a wave of relief. You will take the case. I will take the case. But Richard, I need you to understand what we are up against. Your father has Patricia Morrison, and she is one of the best custody lawyers in the state. She does not lose often. What are our chances? Honestly, not good. The deck is stacked against us, but that does not mean we cannot win. It just means we have to be smarter than they are. What do we need to do? Meet me at my office in 2 hours. Bring Isabella and every document you can find related to Noah's care, your finances, your employment history, everything. We have 2 days to build a case that proves you are better parents than a billionaire grandfather. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of legal preparation, media interviews, and sleepless nights. David Chen worked with the dedication of a man on a mission, building their case piece by piece, while Patricia Morrison's team tried to undermine them at every turn. The courtroom on Wednesday morning was packed. Word of the hearing had leaked, and reporters, supporters, and curious onlookers filled every available seat. James White sat in the front row with his legal team, his expression unreadable as he watched his son and grandson enter the courtroom. Noah, dressed in his best outfit and completely oblivious to the proceedings, charmed everyone within sight with his happy babbling and ready smiles. Several times during the hearing, Judge Patricia Henderson had to suppress a smile as Noah waved at the gallery or clapped his hands in delight. Patricia Morrison presented her case with clinical precision: Richard's recent unemployment, Isabella's failing business, their modest living conditions, the public spectacle they had created around what should have been a private family matter. She painted a picture of irresponsible parents who were more concerned with making a point than providing stability for their child. Your Honor, she concluded, Mr. James White is prepared to provide young Noah with every advantage life can offer: the finest education, comprehensive health care, a trust fund that will ensure his future security, and a stable home environment free from the chaos that currently surrounds his daily life. David Chen's response was passionate and personal. He called Isabella to the stand to talk about the night she had walked the floor with a colicky baby, the way she had learned to interpret every cry and comfort every fear. He called Richard to testify about the moment he first held his son, about the bedtime stories and morning feedings and the profound love that had changed his entire understanding of what mattered in life. Your Honor, David said in his closing argument, this case is not about money or status or what looks best on paper. This case is about love. It is about a child who lights up when he sees his father, who reaches for his mother when he needs comfort, who belongs with the people who have cared for him every day of his 8-month life. But the most powerful moment came when James White himself took the stand. Patricia Morrison had called him to testify about his ability to provide for Noah, but David Chen's cross-examination revealed something else entirely. Mr. White, David said, when did you last hold your grandson? I have not had the opportunity. You have never held him. The circumstances have not allowed. In the 3 weeks since you learned of his existence, you have made no attempt to meet him. James White's jaw tightened. I have been pursuing legal remedies to ensure his welfare. Legal remedies, but no personal contact. No, Mr. White, do you know what Noah's favorite food is? I assume he eats appropriate nutrition for his age. Do you know what time he goes to bed? Children his age require adequate sleep. Do you know what makes him laugh? James White was silent for a long moment. And I know that I can provide him with opportunities his current guardians cannot, but you do not know what makes him laugh. No. David turned to the judge. Your Honor, the difference between these 2 men is clear. One knows what makes this child laugh. The other knows what money can buy. Only one of those things matters to an 8-month-old baby. Judge Henderson recessed for lunch, and the waiting began. Richard and Isabella sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, Noah playing contentedly on a blanket between them, while supporters and media gathered around them. Whatever happens, Isabella said quietly, I want you to know that I love you. I love the man you have become, the father you are, the choice you made. We are going to win, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. And if we do not, then we keep fighting. We appeal, we find another way, we never give up. Richard, look around. Isabella gestured to the crowd of people who had come to support them. Look at all these people who believe in what we are fighting for. Even if we lose today, we have already won something important. What is that? We have shown Noah what it means to fight for love. We have shown him that some things are worth any sacrifice. At 2 o'clock, Judge Henderson returned to the courtroom. The silence was absolute as she took her seat and looked down at the notes in front of her. This court has listened carefully to the arguments presented by both parties. The question before me is not whether Mr. James White has the financial resources to provide for Noah Thompson, because clearly he does. The question is not whether Richard White and Isabella Thompson are perfect parents, because no parent is perfect. The question is what arrangement will serve the best interests of this child. Richard felt Isabella's hand slip into his, her fingers cold with fear. After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, including my own observations of the interactions between Noah and the various adults seeking custody, this court finds that Noah Thompson is a happy, healthy, well-cared-for child who is clearly bonded with his biological parents. While Mr. James White's offer to provide financial advantages is generous, this court believes that love, stability, and genuine parental care cannot be purchased. Richard's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear the judge's words. Furthermore, this court notes that Richard White's decision to prioritize his family over financial gain demonstrates exactly the kind of values we hope to see in a parent. Custody of Noah Thompson will remain with his biological parents, Richard White and Isabella Thompson. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Richard pulled Isabella into his arms, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously, while Noah clapped his hands in delight at all the excitement. Across the courtroom, James White sat in stony silence, his face a mask of controlled fury. But Richard barely noticed his father's reaction. He was too busy kissing his son, kissing Isabella, and marveling at the fact that they had won. They had actually won. The weeks following the custody hearing brought changes that none of them had anticipated. The media attention surrounding their case had transformed Richard from a disgraced businessman into something of a folk hero. A man who had chosen love over money and proven that sometimes David really could defeat Goliath. The story resonated so powerfully with the public that opportunities began appearing from unexpected places. A publisher offered Richard a book deal to tell their story. A production company wanted to option the rights for a film. Speaking engagements poured in from organizations wanting to hear about work-life balance and the courage to choose family over fortune. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. 3 of James White's former clients approached Richard about starting a new investment firm with them as founding partners. "We have been looking for someone with your skills but different values," explained Caroline Mitchell, the CEO of a sustainable energy company. "And someone who understands that business success should not come at the expense of human decency." Richard accepted their offer. And within 6 weeks, White Family Investment Group was born. It was smaller than his father's company, more focused on ethical investing and sustainable business practices, but it was his. More importantly, it was built on the principle that success without happiness was just another form of failure. Isabella's business also experienced an unexpected revival. The publicity had brought her to the attention of clients who specifically wanted to work with someone who had demonstrated such courage and integrity. Her calendar was booked solid for the first time since Noah's birth. But the most meaningful change was the simplest one. They were happy, genuinely, completely, ridiculously happy in a way that neither of them had thought possible. One evening in late November, as they sat on Isabella's couch after putting Noah to bed, Richard pulled out a small velvet box. "Isabella Thompson," he said, dropping to one knee beside the couch. "Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, a simple solitaire that caught the lamplight and threw tiny rainbows on the wall. Isabella stared at it through tears, remembering all the times she had dreamed of this moment and convinced herself it would never happen. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony in the garden behind Isabella's mother's house. Noah, now walking and getting into everything, served as an unofficial ring-bearer who was more interested in eating the flower petals than delivering jewelry. Margaret Chen cried through the entire ceremony, and David Chen served as Richard's best man, joking in his speech that he had never had to win a custody case just to preserve his client's wedding plans. James White was not invited, and he did not attempt to contact them. The silence from that quarter was both a relief and a sadness. Richard had hoped that his father might eventually choose to be a grandfather rather than an enemy, but it appeared that some bridges, once burned, could not be rebuilt. The only shadow on their happiness came 6 months after the wedding, when Richard received a call from his father's doctor. James White had suffered a massive heart attack and was not expected to survive. Richard sat in Isabella's kitchen, staring at his phone after hanging up, trying to process what he felt about this news. "You should go," Isabella said quietly. "Whatever has happened between you, he is still your father. He made his choice. He chose pride over family. And now you have a choice. You can choose forgiveness over pride." Richard arrived at the hospital to find his father unconscious, surrounded by machines and monitors. The man who had seemed so powerful and invincible looked frail and old in the sterile hospital bed. Richard sat beside him for 3 hours, talking quietly about Noah's first steps, Isabella's latest projects, the life they were building together. He talked about forgiveness and regret and the possibility of redemption. He told his father that there would always be a place for him in their family if he could find a way to put love before legacy. James White never regained consciousness. He died peacefully that evening, and Richard was with him when it happened. The funeral was a massive affair attended by hundreds of business associates, politicians, and society figures. Richard delivered the eulogy, speaking about his father's accomplishments while carefully avoiding any mention of their final conflict. It was a gracious speech that honored the dead without endorsing the choices that had separated them. After the service, Richard and Isabella walked through the cemetery together, Noah toddling between them, chattering happily in his limited vocabulary. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and spring flowers were beginning to bloom around the headstones. "Do you think he would have come around eventually?" Isabella asked, "if he had lived longer." "I do not know. I hope so. But Isabella, I cannot spend my life wondering what might have been. I can only focus on what is. And what is?" Richard stopped walking and pulled her into his arms, Noah giggling as he tried to climb up their legs. "What is that I have everything I ever really wanted. I have a wife who loves me, a son who thinks I'm capable of building the most amazing block towers in the world, and a life that feels real instead of performed. No regrets, only one. What is that? I regret that it took me so long to figure out what mattered." Isabella kissed him then, soft and sweet, while Noah demanded attention by tugging on their clothes and babbling his disapproval of being ignored. "Come on," she said, picking up their son. "Let us go home." They walked out of the cemetery together, a family that had been forged through mistakes and choices, through courage and love, through the decision to fight for what mattered most. Behind them, the setting sun cast long shadows on the graves of the past. Ahead of them, the future stretched bright and uncertain and full of possibility. 1 year later, Richard White stood in a crowded park on a Saturday afternoon, watching his 18-month-old son take his first independent steps across the grass. Noah had been walking while holding onto furniture for months, but this was different. This was the moment he decided to trust his own balance and launch himself into open space. "Come on, buddy!" Richard called, kneeling on the ground with his arms outstretched. "You can do it." Noah took one step, then another, his face serious with concentration. Other families in the park stopped what they were doing to watch, sensing that they were witnessing something special. 3 steps, 4, 5, and then Noah was in Richard's arms, both of them laughing with the pure joy of the moment. "Did you see that?" Isabella called from the picnic blanket where she was unpacking their lunch. "Did you see our boy walk?" "I saw," Richard said, spinning Noah around until he squealed with delight. "I saw everything." Isabella joined them on the grass, and they sat together in the afternoon sunshine, Noah between them, babbling happily and pointing at dogs and birds and other toddlers. Richard pulled Isabella close and kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with the spring air. "Do you remember what you said to me the night after the custody hearing?" Isabella asked. "Which part? You said you had everything you ever really wanted." "I remember. Do you still feel that way?" Richard looked at his wife, beautiful in jeans and a sweater with grass stains on the knees from chasing Noah around the playground. He looked at his son, who was now attempting to put a dandelion in his mouth despite their efforts to redirect his attention. He looked around at the ordinary park filled with ordinary families having ordinary Saturday afternoons, and he felt his chest fill with something that might have been perfect contentment. "I told you once that I had everything but nothing," he said quietly. "I was building an empire, but I was not building a life. I thought success meant accumulating things: money, power, status, respect. I thought happiness was something that would come automatically once I had achieved enough. And now I know that I had it backwards. Happiness is not something you achieve, it is something you choose, every day, in small moments and big decisions." Noah had abandoned the dandelion and was now crawling toward a nearby family's dog. His face lit up with the fearless curiosity that seemed to define his approach to the world. Richard gently redirected him back to their blanket, marveling at how much trust it took to be a parent, the constant faith that love would be enough to keep their child safe and happy. "I keep thinking about that morning when you sent me his photo by mistake," Richard continued. "How terrified I was when I realized I might have a son. How convinced I was that I would ruin his life if I tried to be his father. And now I know that the mistake was not the photo. The mistake was thinking I was not ready to be a father. Nobody is ever ready to be a parent, but that does not mean we cannot be good at it." Isabella leaned back against him, watching Noah discover that grass could be pulled up in handfuls and apparently tasted interesting. "He is going to be covered in dirt by the time we go home." "Good. That means he is learning about the world." "Very philosophical, Mr. White." "I have been reading parenting books. They say exploration is healthy for cognitive development." Isabella laughed. "You have been reading parenting books?" "I told you I wanted to be useful. I want to be the kind of father who knows things. You are already the kind of father who knows the most important thing, which is how to love him." Richard was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own father, about the legacy of emotional distance and conditional affection that he had inherited and chosen to break. "I want him to never doubt that he is loved. I want him to never wonder if he has to earn our approval by achieving certain things or being a certain way. He will know. Look at him, Richard. Look at how confident he is, how willing he is to explore and try new things. That comes from knowing he has a safe place to return to." Noah had discovered a butterfly and was attempting to catch it with the determined focus he brought to all his endeavors. The butterfly, wisely, stayed just out of reach, leading Noah on a merry chase across the grass. "We should probably follow him," Isabella said, watching their son's determined pursuit. In a minute, Richard tightened his arms around his wife. "I want to remember this." "Remember what?" "This moment, this perfect, ordinary Saturday afternoon when our son took his first real steps and chased butterflies and covered himself in grass stains. I want to remember that this is what success actually looks like." Isabella turned in his arms and kissed him softly. "I love you, Richard White." "I love you too, Isabella White. Even though I ruined your perfectly planned life, you did not ruin my life. You gave me one." Noah, having given up on the butterfly, came toddling back to them with his arms outstretched, ready for comfort and attention and the security of knowing his parents would always be there to catch him when he fell. Richard lifted him up and settled him on his lap, and the three of them sat together in the spring sunshine, surrounded by the sounds of children playing and dogs barking and life happening all around them. It was ordinary and messy and imperfect, and absolutely everything Richard had never known he wanted. "So, what happens now?" Isabella asked. "What is the next chapter of our story?" Richard looked at his family, his wife, his son, the life they had built together from a mistake that had become the greatest gift he had ever received. "Now we live it. We take it one day at a time, one moment at a time, one choice at a time. We keep choosing love over everything else, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult." Noah had fallen asleep in Richard's arms, exhausted from his afternoon of exploration and discovery. His little fist was curled around Richard's finger, his face peaceful and trusting in the way that only children could manage. "I think we should go home," Isabella said softly. "Someone needs a nap." "In a few more minutes," Richard said. "I am not ready for this to end yet." "It does not have to end. We have tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. We have the rest of our lives." Richard kissed the top of Noah's head, breathing in the sweet scent of baby shampoo and grass and sunshine. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter what challenges we face or mistakes we make, we will remember this. We will remember that love is enough. We will remember that we chose each other, and we chose this life, and it was the best choice we ever made. I promise," Isabella said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. They sat there until the sun began to set, reluctant to leave the park where Noah had taken his first steps, where they had been reminded once again that the most important moments in life were often the smallest ones. Eventually, they packed up their picnic and walked home together, Noah sleeping peacefully in Richard's arms, Isabella's hand in his free one. As they walked, Richard thought about the man he used to be, the one who measured success in dollars and power, who thought love was a luxury he could not afford. That man felt like a stranger now, someone from another life entirely. The man he was now understood that wealth meant having enough time to spend with his family. Power meant being the kind of father his son could count on. Success meant building something that mattered, not an empire, but a home. He had traded everything he thought he wanted for everything he had never known he needed, and it had been the best deal of his life. Their apartment building came into view, ordinary and modest and perfect. Home was not about the size of the space or the cost of the furnishings. Home was wherever his family was, wherever love lived, wherever Noah learned to take his first steps, and Isabella smiled at him like he was the answer to every question she had ever asked. "Welcome home," Isabella said as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. "Thank you," Richard replied, and he meant it in every possible way. They were home. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.